Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Implementing High Performance Ransomware Protection in 2020. Today's event is brought to you by Pure Storage and Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. We want this event to be an educational event, and we encourage you to use the questions box there in your audience console. We'll be answering those questions throughout the event and doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of today's event. We also encourage you to check out the handouts that are available in the Handouts tab. And finally, we'll be announcing the winner of an Amazon $300 gift card at the end of today's webinar. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the drawing has already occurred. Prize terms and conditions can be found at events.actualtechmedia.com. And with that, I'm excited to introduce you to today's presenters. They are Mr. David Huskisson, Rapid Resource Solutions Manager at Pure Storage, Mr. Sean Liu, Solutions Architect with the Global Alliances team at Veeam, and Mr. Danny Pahar, Director of Security Awareness at Cyber Insurance Education. Thank you, David, Sean, and Danny for being here on today's event. All right, before I hand it over to our expert presenter, Mr. Danny Pahar, first, I want to do just a brief introduction around today's topic. Everyone out there is struggling to ensure that our companies are adequately prepared for disaster. I was a former IT manager myself. I went through this whole exercise. I know how tough it can be trying to ensure that you can recover no matter what happens to the company, no matter what happens to your data. Today, I think we're experiencing disaster challenges and work from home challenges that we never really have foreseen in the past. So, that's one of the most important things that we do as IT professionals is ensure that our data is safe and ensure that we can recover from disaster. At the same time, we're dealing with protecting a massively growing data set. Our data at most companies is growing, in leaps and bounds, and we're constantly struggling to protect that data no matter where it is. And that data is being distributed more and more across mobile devices and SaaS services and multiple company locations. We also have data security challenges. We have to ensure that that data is protected and doesn't be held by ransom. And there are ransomware threats, every night in the nightly news, I'm afraid. And it seems like more and more companies are reporting that they have experienced some form of ransomware. Now, when it comes to ransomware, specifically impacting Canada, if you look at the cybersecurity survey from CIRA, most recently in 2019, it reported that 71% of Canadian organizations experienced at least one impactful cyber attack that year. That's a very high percentage. And 43% of Canadian organizations were unaware of Canada's legal requirements following a breach. And that's a big problem, not being aware of exactly what to do when you do have a breach. And then there's also another report that I read recently about the Canadian municipalities fighting ransomware. And it went through the details of exactly what happened in these attacks. And they talked about how IT managers and the company executives were simply overwhelmed, and they felt like they were sitting ducks for these cyber terrorists. And unfortunately, the full cost of recovery was estimated by both of these municipalities to be approximately $250,000 each. So there's a huge cost, a huge impact, whether you're a government organization or an independent company or even an individual. We're being attacked by ransomware right and left too, it seems. And to give us some expert insight on these challenges and some advice on what we can do about it, I'm excited to introduce Mr. Danny Pahar. Danny, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Thank you to Actual Tech Media, Pure Storage, and Veeam for putting on this event. But also thank you to everyone who's attending. Thank you to everyone in today's audience. Such an important part of good cybersecurity for our organizations, for our society in general, is learning. And you guys coming here today, that's a part of it. So thank you to you guys for joining. Like the title page says here, every cyber criminal loves a crisis, and that's what the world is going through right now. So we are feeling it. Anytime you want to break down something, you got to look at two things. You got to look at the threat, and you got to look at the vulnerability. I'm going to touch on that a little bit now, but I'm going to get more into that in a couple more slides. But right now, we are seeing massive spikes in phishing attacks where people are using COVID-19 as a topic to trick us. Why? Because they're playing on our emotions. The threat has spiked. Business might have slowed, but cybercrime increases. But also the vulnerability. What's a big vulnerability now? We got so many people. Everyone's working from home. Now, was this part of a strategy where we got to take time and, okay, for the next 3 months, we're going to make sure all of our employees can work from home securely? No, it was like we snapped our fingers and all of a sudden we went from business as usual to all of a sudden working at home. Scary stuff. And this is why it's so important to have these kind of calls. And I'm going to be getting into all of this stuff. But before that, a little bit about me. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for the past 20 years. Basically, I've been in it so long that the job that I had before joining the cybersecurity industry was I was working at Chuck E. Cheese. No kidding aside, if you were at Chuck E. Cheese in the 90s, the late 90s, and you saw that mouse walking around, that might have been me that you were looking at, because that's what I was doing over 20 years ago. But since then, I've joined the cybersecurity world. It's been good to me. I spend a lot of time writing for Forbes magazine. I'm a cybersecurity content contributor for them. And if I remotely sound familiar to you, that's because I also do cybersecurity television hits. I'm a cybersecurity global television expert. Interesting, just a quick story. I remember my family was telling me, Danny, you got to be careful. Sometimes TV can make you conceited. And I'm like, guys, I worked at Chuck E. Cheese for way too long. I'm way too humble. It's not going to make me conceited. But, then they start doing your hair. They start doing your makeup. And it's like, you go to these events and you're like, okay, Pure, okay, Veeam, okay, ATM, who's going to do my hair? And who's going to send somebody over here to do my makeup? But to which, of course, they laughed in my face. But also, keeping things real for me is my work with law enforcement. I spend a lot of time working with the Toronto Cyber Task Force and the FBI Cyber Task Force. I like talking about the FBI simply because these guys are so crazy about security. It tells an interesting story. So these guys are not allowed to have their picture shown anywhere with their name. As you can see, so this is a picture from a project that I had worked on. There's me, beside me, there's a lawyer, and beside the lawyer, there's the FBI agent we worked with. And so you can see my picture, the lawyer's picture, but you can't see the FBI agent's picture. You see a shadowed out silhouette. And so they gave us very strict rules telling us nobody is to take this person's picture, no one is to post it anywhere, and no one is allowed to tag this person. So imagine my surprise. Later that day, I get tagged in a photo from that exact same event, and there's the same 3 people sitting on the stools as you see on that prior screen. And it was a picture that my wife put up on Facebook saying, hey, so proud of my husband. There he is beside Special Agent ... name and rank ... And I'm like, holy cow, I'm going to prison. So I didn't go to prison, but yeah, they took down that stuff pretty fast. They have actual takedown services. But that aside, interesting thing about working with these guys is they really helped me realize cybercrime and the importance of cybersecurity is so much bigger than what we might think it is. And what I mean by that is, I know in Canada, if you suffer a breach and you want to involve law enforcement, you're going to call the local cops. You're going to call the cops of whatever city that you're in. But I noticed in the States, the FBI really pushes the message of the importance of cybersecurity awareness. They're aggressively pushing that. And so I thought it was weird because I didn't think it was their jurisdiction. So I talked to them about that. And they had said, the reason why we push this so aggressively is not because of a jurisdiction thing, but because when somebody steals sensitive information from an organization and they sell that on the dark web, and of course the dark web is the digital underground where you can essentially buy or sell whatever you want, what they're doing is they're strengthening the dark web. And the dark web is home to so many crimes that are detrimental to humanity, like child pornography, slavery, weapons of mass destruction. And they're like, those are the crimes that we're really concerned about. That's on the FBI's radar, and that's all being funded by cybercrime. So every time we make an organization more secure, we are making the world a safer place to dangers that are detrimental to humanity. So let's get into that. So when we talk about dangers, anytime I analyze danger, and I mentioned these two words at the very beginning, but anytime I analyze danger, there's always two things that I look at. I look at the threat and I look at the vulnerability. And that's not just cyber danger, that's any kind of danger. I get this from my work with law enforcement. That's always how they talk. Of course, the threat being what's the bad thing out there, the vulnerability being how are we weak to that bad thing. The threat, we are talking a lot about ransomware. You see it on the title of today's session. It's all about ransomware. However, what's behind the ransomware? The threat is the fact that cybercrime is a thriving criminal industry. These guys are making a lot of money doing this. These guys are very safe and they're very protected doing this. There was a study that had showed for the longest time drugs was the #1 crime in terms of revenue. But in 2014, cybercrime surpassed drugs in terms of revenue. So anytime you see imagery of a drug dealer with money or movies or music videos, you know what? Cyber criminals are making more. The difference is they're not getting killed doing what they do. I mean, we hear about gang dealers shooting each other all the time. When have you ever heard of a cyber criminal shooting up another cyber criminal? And even if they get arrested, so often they get offered a job by the very people that arrested them. This is essentially making it a super crime. But there's also a huge vulnerability to it. One of the vulnerabilities, well, the fact is we live in a world where everything keeps changing, the mobility of business. 20 years ago, if I was to say to you guys, hey guys, I'm here to talk to you about corporate security, you'd probably think I was there to talk about video cameras and security guards. But as time kept changing, we keep having to rethink our security. Also, we've got the government is involved. And, David mentioned a stat about how 40% of Canadians don't actually know what to do once they've been breached. They don't know about the compliances that apply to them. Here's where this becomes a huge problem. Let's take a look at Uber. 2015, Uber was breached. They were ransomware. The bad guys got them for $100,000. Now, in 2015, Uber didn't have a single piece of negative press against them. They were rocking and rolling. Everyone loved Uber in 2015. $100,000 that a company like that has to pay, not that big a deal. But they did everything wrong with what it was that they were supposed to do for breach notification. And as a result of that, they were fined. Now, keeping in mind, the initial crime was $100,000. I want you to take for a second and just guess, what is it that you think they had to pay? The answer, $148 million. So, initial crime, $100K, fine, $148 million. Holy cow, that's crazy. Imagine that. What you do wrong after is worse than the initial crime itself. So this is something that if PIPEDA, as an example, is applicable to you, the new changes of PIPEDA that took effect on November 1st, 2018, this is something you really have to know because it can be devastating. The skills gap. So you're trying to find someone. Hey, you know what? I wanted someone to work for my company that knows cybersecurity. Guess what? That's a tough call to find because we've got so many more jobs than we have people to fill them. This is something that I felt trying to find someone on my team back in 2008. And I didn't read a single stat about it. Now, if you do an online search for cybersecurity skills gap, you'll see all kinds of stats, all kinds of studies. This has become a real problem. I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure why no one is applying for this job, but we've got so many more jobs than we have people to fill them. This is creating a problem. And of course, one of my favorites, the human element. Imagine, as an organization, part of what you're trying to protect are your people. And what are people doing? They are making it very, very easy for a thriving criminal industry to take advantage of the information that they are putting out there. I think this picture probably helps explain it best. People in the 60s, I better not say that or the government will wiretap my house. People today, hey, wiretap. Do you have a recipe for pancakes? We are just putting it all out there, and the bad guys are using this info that we are putting out there. They're using it against us to manipulate us, to trick us, and hence the ransomware then gets delivered. And remember what I said, thriving criminal industry. I talked about that. I gave you some details about that, but sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is what I mean by a thriving criminal industry. Do yourself a favor after this call is done and do an online search for BBC Tech Scam Call Center. They did a great expose on this, where somebody hacked the security cameras of a tech scam call center. And I want you to take a look at that picture. Everyone in there is a criminal. Everyone in there is professionally scamming someone. Okay? It's not one person working alone in a basement. It's not somebody working in a cave. This is a call center. So when I say it's a thriving business, this is exactly what I mean. These guys, you slip up even a little bit, these guys are all over it. So ransomware, that's the bullet. Ransomware is the thing that is the big pain in the butt. But what's more dangerous than the bullet? Of course, the person shooting the gun. Ransomware is just a tool used by a cyber criminal. Remember, the real threat is cybercrime itself, and that it's a thriving criminal industry. So David gave us some stats, and David talked about the stats in the 70% of Canadians that were hit with this. He's talking about probability. I've got a stat on impact. So according to recent reports, ransomware cost Canadian organizations $2.3 billion last year. Again, David spoke about probability. I'm talking about impact. We are seeing it. I'm doing a lot of work with Ontario schools. I'm seeing it even with schools. And you think, well, what money do they have? Doesn't matter. They've got things worth money. They've got information. Of course, on March 26th, there was a story about the beer store being cyber attacked. They're still under investigation right now, so we don't have the final numbers. We don't know exactly what that attack cost them. But right after that, they weren't able to accept credit card payments. They were only able to accept cash payments. Now, keep in mind, this is at a time in the world where everyone's saying we're not going to accept cash because it's dangerous. We have to touch each other. We have to touch the cash. We're only going to accept, tap payments. But Beer Store was forced to accept cash because of that cyber attack. And just wait, in given time, we're going to find out how bad that actually is. We don't know, but I'm going to guess it's going to be something big. Now, here's the problem with ransomware. A lot of times we only think the cost of ransomware is the actual amount they're asking for, but it's so much more than that, right? We're talking about legal costs. We're talking about compliance fines. We're talking about downtime. We're talking about loss of trust. 60% of small businesses go out of business in 6 months or less. And the other thing to remember is that some people might say, yeah, but why would somebody come after me? I've got a smaller business. They're not going to come after me. Remember, clean social security numbers of youngsters age 2 and younger is an extremely popular seller on the dark web. So I don't care how small your business is. These guys are even going after youngsters age 2 and under. Why? Because data is worth money. That's one of the things that we've got to remember, right? Children have a blank slate, and a fraudster can make up a computer identity easily because there's no information to contradict it. And of course, just a reminder, when we ask ourselves, but what are the chances of this happening to me? This is a great quote that I took from a former FBI director, and that is, I am convinced that there are only 2 types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. And as if that sounds damning enough, it actually extends. And even they are converging into one category, companies that have been hacked and will be hacked again. That's Robert Mueller, and he said that back when he was the FBI director. So that's it for me. I'm going to call up David, and go ahead, David, take it away.
Thank you, Danny. So we're going to kind of change. So that was a great introduction from a subject matter expert in the area of cybersecurity. So we're going to really now drill down in partnership with Sean here on the Veeam side. So we're going to really drill down now into the ransomware, into the ransomware use case, the ransomware threat, and as Danny said, this is a relatively new area for Pure. Obviously, we're a storage company, and it's only over the last sort of 8 to 9 months we've been building solutions in this area. So it's been a really interesting voyage of discovery for certainly for myself. And I mean, it's very, very clear, as Danny said, if you go back and just look at news articles over the last, I think I looked over the last 30 days, and there was something around 20 companies in the press that had had a ransomware attack, and those are the companies that like to, that will report it. Not everyone reports it. So I think regardless of what vertical your organization is in, there's a long litany here of companies that have been attacked. And so I think it's very easy to conclude that, no organization is immune. And we've seen it happening to, even in these tough times that we're in right now, we even still see healthcare get attacked. So no one really is immune. And again, Danny said, it's not just the cost of the ransom, it's all the other things that go with it. There may be, certainly in respect of Canada, there may be, government penalties. There's certainly brand reputation. We've even come across cases where, businesses have actually gone out of business because they weren't able to recover from a ransomware attack. And if you look at it, and again, as we started, on this journey with Veeam, it's very easy just to go read stuff, and these are real screens. And I think the one that really kind of frightened me was this one, a screen grab from a German train station. You can see, the ransomware attack right there on the arrivals and the departure board. So, it's an incredibly real threat. And when we talk to customers, and I know it's the same for Veeam, this is literally in the top three. It's always one of the top three things that chief executive officers, are really concerned about, because in the end, it can kill your organization. And so, so there's lots of things you can do. I know there's a whole the concept of defense in depth, where, the more obstacles you put, from the endpoint to the network to the application, there's more and more things you can put in the way of the attacker. And, again, Danny talked about this. There are farms of people worldwide that are spending all day and all night trying to attack your organization's systems. And the more that the more defense in depth you have, the more you eventually discourage them, and time is money, and they'll move on to other things. But what's kind of interesting, having said all of that, you can put as many obstacles as you like in front of an attacker, but in the end, it's ultimately your backup and recovery practices and solution that you rely on. So there's a whole wealth of documents you can go read, but this one in particular is quite interesting, because it really says, it really talks about the last line of defense, which is in a defense in depth strategy. Your last line of defense is your data protection, your data protection environment. That's where you go to effectively, if the worst comes to the worst, your data protection strategy is what may save you from paying the ransom. So I certainly urge you to try and go and read about this. And I think, David, before we get into the actual presentation, I think we're going to do a quick poll here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a poll here for everyone out there in the audience. I just brought up the poll. It's in the slides window. And the question is, what is your strategy to recover from a ransomware attack? And so just select the option that corresponds to you. And I will be sharing the results of this in just a moment. And you can see how you stack up with your peers who are on the event today. All right, I see a lot of votes coming in. Thank you for those responses. Let's get just a few more. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone, for those. Let me share the results with you. And it's roughly tied between 43% recover from snapshot or replication and 42% recover from backup. Just 1% said they would pay the ransom, I guess, and 12% have another option. David, what's your take on that?
I mean, that's roughly in line with what I'd expect. It's good to see, that this audience is trying to leverage snapshots and replication, and it's also good. I think it's good validation that that we're seeing backup products are the last line of defense, and I'm clearly delighted that there's very few people in the audience that just want to pay the ransom. So if anything, it kind of corroborates what we've seen elsewhere.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I'm glad to see that too, that not too many are paying the ransom. All right, back to you, David.
That's good to see. So I think actually we're going to segue to Sean here. I think Sean.
Yep. Great. Thanks, David. All right, so let's talk about the Veeam cloud data management platform, right? So we just recently released version 10 of our Veeam backup and replication product, which is our flagship product and essentially our data management platform from which all of these different capabilities will converge upon, right? So Veeam has evolved throughout the years, and I've actually been with Veeam for going on 10 years now. So I've kind of seen the evolution of the actual product itself, you know, growing up from just a product that protects virtual machines to multiple hypervisors to physical servers to cloud native workloads, and just being able to merge all of those different capabilities onto a single data management platform has been a really strong and compelling story for Veeam customers. So about 2 years ago, right, a lot of our joint customers with Pure approach Veeam, and they approach Pure as well, and they're saying Pure FlashArray has this great capability, right? Their snapshots are really powerful, has no impact to the environment. Can we leverage that snapshot to perform Veeam backups from, right? So this is a slide just kind of detailing the capabilities from their snapshot engine, and of course it's a much more efficient snapshot engine than what vSphere has natively. Right, so why not leverage that? So about 2 years ago, we released a plugin for Pure FlashArray that plugs in directly into Veeam backup and replication, and it enables a number of different capabilities on our platform. But the biggest thing is that we're not taking away the native capability, right? We're simply augmenting it and enhancing it and giving you more options on where to store your backups, right? And from which you can recover. Like the poll just before I started talking here, right? It looks like about half of you recover from either snapshots or from backups, right? The nice thing about the plugin is it gives you both options, right? That's really the strength of the solution, is because we can layer on top of being able to snapshot frequently. We can layer on top of that a backup that can now take your backups and send it to a different target, right? It can take it off of the array itself, right? The easiest way to prevent from having all of your eggs broken is to put your eggs in different baskets, right? That's essentially what we're giving you the capability to do, right? You can now back up and send it to a FlashBlade, for instance, right? And we have a really strong story around FlashBlade, which we're going to get into here, because FlashBlade enables some really great options from a recovery standpoint, right? So let's continue on some of the different features that we have, right? And the nice thing about what we do here from this perspective, where we're layering backups on top of snapshots, is that we can actually schedule the native snapshots on the FlashArray directly within the Veeam console. So you don't have to leave the Veeam console and go into the Purity interface to schedule the snapshots. We can do everything natively within Veeam via the plugin. Okay, one of the primary features is the ability to actually leverage the FlashArray snapshot to perform backups from. Not only are we backing up directly from the storage-based snapshot, but we layer on top of that an application consistency engine, right? So what we're doing there is we're making sure that we are able to leverage VSS, right? So we can make sure that any in-flight transactions are committed and everything is in a nice consistent state before we actually take the hardware snapshot, okay? And then we perform the backup from that application consistent snapshot. The nice thing about that is not only can we back up from that application consistent snapshot, but now you can actually retain that application consistent snapshot as well. So you have an extra layer of protection. Another really great feature and enhancement is the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshot, right? This is very powerful, because you can actually, if you're a FlashArray user and have been for some time, and you're just now taking a look at Veeam, right? The nice thing is you can actually implement the Veeam solution, and even with existing snapshots that you've scheduled natively within the FlashArray itself, you can leverage the Veeam Explorer for storage snapshots to perform any number of different recovery options, right? No longer do you have to roll back the entire volume. You can now go and pick and choose what you wish to recover from that snapshot. And we have some mechanisms in the background. We have some really great patent pending technologies in the background that ensure that the snapshot that we're recovering from is not altered in any way, right? We do the same thing with backups, right? We're really serious about ensuring the integrity of the backups and the snapshots that you have chosen to retain. So those different recovery options include anything from individual virtual machines down to individual files within the guest operating system, even down to individual application items within those different virtual machines, right? For a number of different explorers that are designed for Microsoft applications like Exchange, SharePoint, Active Directory, and SQL. We also have a Veeam Explorer for Oracle, and these explorers are designed specifically for these applications. So even if you're not an expert in Exchange, it's a very intuitive interface, and if you're a Windows user, it's a ribbon-style interface like most Windows applications, so you can really kind of get the hang of it very quickly and be able to pull out a single email within a matter of minutes. All right, so now I'm going to just hand it back to David to talk briefly about the FlashBlade.
Thank you, Sean. Let me go back to this one. Okay, so that covers off quite nicely the integration that we have with FlashArray and Veeam. So that's snapshot management capability. So you still get the power of FlashArray snapshots, but you have the really great orchestration layer that Veeam provides. So what about the solution? So again, if I go back to the poll that we just did, you know, that covers sort of, there was a lot of people on the poll in the audience who use snapshots, but you can't always use snapshots. Maybe you're not using, you know, VMware snapshots. Maybe you're just doing traditional, backup. So, you know, what does my solution look like here? So I'm going to spend the next few moments now talking about FlashBlade. So just a very brief introduction to FlashBlade. FlashBlade was Pure's second product. We're now in our just coming up to our fourth year of FlashBlade, and very different from FlashArray. So shares the same same disk kind of infrastructure. It's all flash, but different in terms of its architecture. It's based on blades. So each blade has some storage, but also has some compute and has some network, and you'll see hopefully in the next slide how important that is for our story. But I guess the biggest difference architecturally is it's not a block-based device. FlashBlade is really what we like to call a fast object device. So it's got native S3, it's got NFS, and it's got CIFS. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, especially as S3 has evolved, is there's now a demand, or we're starting to see quite a big demand now for this concept of fast object. Traditionally, object is seen as cheap and deep and slow and big. Well, FlashBlade is starting to change that, and there are actually applications that are actually being developed now. Pretty much have all got S3 and S3 API plugin, but are actually demanding performance. So FlashBlade sort of riding on top of that wave. But our number one use case today, because of its scalable all flash scale out architecture, our number one use case today is actually what we call rapid restore, but you know, what would be seen as a backup and recovery target. And you know, this just gives you a sense of some of the theoretical metrics of FlashBlade. Let me show you with this diagram here. I think I've been in the data protection world for a long time, and certainly, you know, backup, as you know, generally the story has been, you know, we've seen lots of, you know, brain power applied to optimizing the backup phase. So, you know, sort of deduplication and compression, you know, really reduce down the amount of data that you have to protect, and that leads to shorter backup times. But generally, we haven't really thought about the recovery side of this. And you can see with FlashBlade, we're starting to change that discussion, just because with the blade architecture, as you scale FlashBlade out, not only does its write performance increase, but its read performance increases, exponentially. And if you combine that with the power of all flash disk, you have no moving parts. And especially when you're talking about deduplication, kind of rehydrating deduplication gets really slow if you've got to go and seek blocks certainly in a traditional spinning disk kind of device. And we've seen massive performance increases into the terabytes an hour. And again, as you scale FlashBlade up, that performance gets bigger. So our message really around data protection is, let's start to focus more on the outcome, actually on what we're trying to do. And you'll see that there's actually quite a neat intersection with ransomware around that focus on recovery, because recovery is the key thing in a ransomware attack you've got to be able to do. And we'll get to that just in a moment. And I guess another kind of key difference here is that we call, when we talk about FlashBlade, we talk about a data hub. And again, that's quite different from, the traditional approach in the backup universe, which is to have a dedicated appliance acting as your backup and recovery appliance. FlashBlade brings this modern scale-out all-flash architecture, but doesn't limit the use case just to data protection. So you get a sense from this slide the kind of use cases that FlashBlade was designed to support. And again, go back in time 3 years ago, we conceived this platform, the FlashBlade platform, to actually act as a storage platform for what you might call newer applications. So I'm thinking of Splunk and Elastic, log analytics, AI workloads, and we've had a lot of success there. But it just shows you that the whole restore issue has still been a problem, because our biggest use case today is the rapid restore one. And I like to see, I think I'm very passionate about being able to sort of give an example to you guys of that, what we call the data hub. And there's none better in my mind than the work that Veeam have done with their test labs capability. So test labs with Veeam allows you very quickly to power on a virtual machine and present it for actual use. So it's a virtual machine you can actually log into and do things with, but you're not actually recovering it. You're actually powering it up from the backup. So you're not doing backup, restore, power on. You're just doing backup and then powering it on with test labs. And you can see that gives you lots of opportunities to do some interesting work. So sandbox testing, you can look at, in terms of ransomware, you could power up safely in an environment and go and do some investigation as to what's been infected and what hasn't. There's test dev, there's training, software development, and a bunch of other use cases. But because of FlashBlade's architecture, test labs runs beautifully on FlashBlade. Okay, and just finally, I just wanted to share some of the success stories we've had with Veeam and with FlashBlade, and I'm not going to read all of these out. You'll be able to get a handout of these slides, but this just shows you, some of the comments our customers have made, and some of them are geared towards the restore message, but some are also geared towards FlashBlade itself as a platform. So the smaller footprint and the less power consumption and so forth, and that's the virtue of having a modern data protection platform. So I think, David, we have another poll for our audience here.
That's right. So the poll on the screen right now says, if you were to lose a mission critical application, how long would it take to recover with your current solution? So the options are under an hour, 1 to 4 hours, 4 to 8, or longer than I'd like. So let me share this poll with everyone out there right now, and I appreciate your responses. I'll give you a moment to answer that, and then I'll share the results of that poll with you. All right, I see some responses coming in. Thank you, everyone, for those. Let's get just a few more, and I'll share the results.
I think even if it's under an hour, it's longer than most people would probably like anyway.
I think you're right, Sean. All right, thank you for all those. Let me share the results now, and it looks like the top response was 1 to 4 hours with 36%. 17% said 4 to 8, and 27% said longer than I'd like. Sean or David, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not surprising, right? And it's really kind of changes the way you think about backups, right? And we've kind of seen this transition, especially with the adoption of rapid restore amongst many of our joint customers. As customers are just kind of, backup is now being treated more as a first-class citizen, right? Because it's not about the process of being able to back up, right? It's about the shift in focus on being able to recover when you need to, and being able to recover quickly and efficiently, right? And we've done many things to help make that more efficient, including technologies like instant VM recovery, right? Being able to power on machines and applications and get them running before you actually start the recovery process, right? So it's kind of flipping the paradigm there, right? It's doing things backwards than what some customers are used to, right? And I think that's something that's continuing and ongoing, and as people get more exposure and people kind of change the way they look at backups, this number will continue to be driven down, right? So I expect, moving forward, we'll start to see under an hour a lot more frequently in a larger percentage of the cases.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah, and I think we've done a couple of these polls elsewhere. That again, that it doesn't strike me as too far out of what we've seen elsewhere. And I think there's also, I think as Sean said, I've certainly noticed over years that there's if you look at all the IT systems and things that you use outside of your general workday, there's definitely this always on, I always, need to have it. And I think we're all becoming less tolerant of not having systems available. I mean, if you couldn't go shopping on Amazon.com, or you couldn't watch favorite movies on Netflix because it was down, I think that's a really good example of, how frustrated you would feel. And, so I think part of this sort of always on kind of this expectation is fueling some of those figures we've seen there. And, this now we can sort of having established that, we can sort of transition to the ransomware solution that us and Veeam have built together. And as I said earlier, backups really are your last line of defense. If everything goes down, if your snapshots get encrypted and you get that horrible message that I showed at the start of the session of our session, where do you go? You really end up in two places. I either pay the ransom and hope that by paying the ransom, I get my data back. And I think there was some statistic I saw that said 45% of people that pay the ransom don't get their data back. And remember, there's no honor amongst thieves here. So even if you pay the money, there's no guarantee you'll get your data back. So where do you go? And obviously, backups are, and I think Sean actually said it quite right. I think, backups have long been seen as a second-class citizen in the data center world, something that you have to do because it's regulation, but it's expensive and it feels like insurance. But literally now, I think I feel like backup and recovery is having a bit of a renaissance, because that's the thing that can get you out of paying the ransom. But I think really based off the back of that poll, if you take a step back and look, imagine the worst thing that's happened. I've had a ransomware attack. What do I need to get back from that? I need two things. The first thing is I need, validated, cleaned, uninfected, usable backup copies. And we know that, ransomware, I think Danny said earlier, we're dealing with a bunch of really clever people. And so for a long time, they went after primary storage, they go and encrypt that, they pay the money. Then they realize some customers aren't paying because they're recovering. So we now know that ransomware attackers are now not only going after your primary storage where your applications are being hosted, they're actually also seeking out secondary copies. So they're actually going after your backup copies because they know that's where you have an option of not paying them the ransom. So the first point here is you've got to really be sure that your backup systems and your backup copies are clean. They're not encrypted, because the worst thing in the world could happen is you go to a backup copy and they've found your backup copies. And again, there's another statistic from Microsoft that says, in a large ransomware hacking attack, the attackers spend something north of 200 days, snooping around networks looking for copies of stuff as well as the primary. So you need those clean data copies to recover from. And then, really, as we've introduced, you need a way of being able to recover quickly, because it's all very well having the clean backup images, but it's going to take you 6 weeks to get back to a full operational state. You could go out of business. And we've read about customers that have actually gone out of business, not because they didn't have the backup data to recover from, they just couldn't recover in time. And the poster child story to read is go and read about Maersk Shipping. They had a massive attack, I think, in 2017. Maersk are the container company that globally ship things worldwide, and they had 10,000 VMs at 7 p.m. in the evening. And when they came in North America time, they had none. Everything was encrypted. Now, luckily for them, they had a really good and solid backup strategy. It still took them 3 weeks to get back to operational status. That cost them north of $200 million. Now that's a big example, but just think, a lot of you answered there, not, there was a certain percentage you answered not as quickly as I'd like. Just imagine that for all of your data and the cost to the organization. So let's talk about the technology solution. So we've had a feature inside of our FlashBlade storage offering for some time called what we call SafeMode snapshots. And so they're designed, they're snapshots, they're file system snapshots. So that's pretty much table stakes for everyone who's got some kind of storage. Our biggest differentiator with SafeMode is we limit the control, or in fact, we remove the control of SafeMode snapshots away from the FlashBlade administrator. So we have implemented something like what you could see sort of separation of powers. There are regular file system snapshots that the FlashBlade administrator can add, manage, and control, but we have a special version of those called SafeMode, which are totally out of control of the FlashBlade administrator. You can only get these SafeMode snapshots turned on and modified in respect of frequency and retention and timing. You can only have that done in conjunction with Pure Support. And we have an authentication mechanism with Pure Support that leads you through to getting those things changed. And by separating the powers out, we basically reduce, and I think if Danny was still on the call, these are words he would know, we're basically reducing the attack footprint that an attacker can go after. So sure, they can get onto a FlashBlade, they can go and look at things and, compromise administrator accounts, but what they can't do is get to the SafeMode snapshots. So by having SafeMode snapshots, we have an independent snapshot mechanism, independent of the FlashBlade administrator, and that's where we start to take copies of backup images, allowing you to recover. And I'll show you a diagram in just a moment. And the core thing to FlashBlade, much like FLASHARRAY, all of our, if you like, features and capabilities are just a core part of the storage platform. So there's no special licensing or anything you need. As long as you're a FlashBlade user, you can go through the authentication mechanism, and we can get SafeMode turned on for you. So how does it operate? So we try to design it so that, let me build that actually, we've got a slight issue with the slide here. So I don't know whether this is coming through on, because I think this is animated, it sort of builds out, but let me try and describe it. So we've designed SAFEMODE, much like everything else we do at Pure. We're trying to design it to make it as simple as possible. And the way it works is we've got this set it and forget it philosophy. So if you visualize a FlashBlade with Veeam, okay, you've got your Veeam backup images sitting on FlashBlade. We also recommend you back up Veeam's configuration to FlashBlade. You go through the authorization process with Pure Support. We turn SAFEMODE on, and we're effectively taking snapshots, file system snapshots of both the Veeam images and the Veeam catalog. And that's literally all you need to do. On a day-to-day basis, you're just taking snapshots, you're retaining them. We recommend 14 days, but you can retain them for longer or shorter depending on your attitude towards risk. And then you get into a very simple recovery situation where you've been compromised, you can't use Veeam to recover, you delete the compromised data, you would reinstall the Veeam components that you need. If Veeam itself has been compromised, we would advise you to rebuild your Veeam environment. You can point Veeam at the SAFEMODE snapshots, and then you can actually begin recovery. And you can go to Pure's website, and we've actually got a live video of one of our solutions architects actually doing that recovery for you. And let me briefly take you through. So this is looking at it from a step-by-step approach. So this is how we operate in steady state. I've got my Veeam backup images going to my FlashBlade. Both my primary and my secondary have been encrypted, so I can't access my Veeam backup images on FlashBlade. My production systems are out, they've been encrypted, so then I have to go into recovery mode. And it's really simple with Veeam, and that's what I really like about Veeam, the elegance of the solution. There's no complex copying. All I need to do is stand up a repository server. If I can't get to my existing one, I stand up a repository server. I point my repository server at the SAFEMODE snapshot. Veeam will do like a quick index before I start recovering. It will then tell me the contents of that SAFEMODE snapshot from a virtual machine perspective, and then I can literally start recovering. So there's almost no time, apart from provisioning a new repository server, there's almost no time I need to get switched on and get recovering. So I think I'm just going to briefly hand over to Sean, who's going to take you through a couple of other Veeam features here.
All right, thank you, David. Yeah, so just to kind of build upon what David's talking about here, right? We also have an additional feature built into Veeam to kind of help mitigate some of the risk, because I mean, when you have something like a ransomware attack occur, right? You're going to spend a lot of time scrubbing your systems and kind of getting rid of any type of infections that you've detected, right? So you spend hours sometimes doing this. The last thing you want to do upon recovering a mission critical application back to production is to reinfect your production environment again, right? So that's where Veeam introduced Secure Restore, building on top of the Data Labs feature that David went over a little while ago there. This is a automated action that you can trigger upon restoring a ransomware infected virtual machine, right? You can select a recovery point that you deem may be safe. And what we'll do is we'll actually automatically power it on inside of the Data Labs environment, where it can not affect any of your other production virtual machines. And then from there, we can then go run through with, your anti-malware, antivirus product of choice. Right? And this all happens in automated fashion. And if any type of infection is found, what Veeam's going to do is it gives you a number of different options to choose from. Right? And once again, you can automate this so you can select the action ahead of time. Right? So if we detect an infection, you can choose to scrap the recovery. Right? So you can select a different recovery point. Or you can choose to go ahead and recover anyway, but disable all of the network connections. Therefore, it cannot infect any other virtual machines inside the environment, and you can go and proceed any type of manual cleanup that you need to do. And of course, if no infections are found, you can safely go ahead and continue with the restore process automatically. Okay, pass it back to you, David.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. Okay, I'm conscious of time, and we kind of want to get to the poll here. So just very quickly, hopefully you can see we've given you a quick flavor of our joint integration here. We've actually already got customers deploying this in anger, so we're really excited about that. And I think two things. I think from the technology perspective that are key for you to walk away with today. We've kept it simple. So SAFEMODE snapshots, set and forget, and then the actual recovery path with Veeam is beautifully simple. So certainly review the video that we're about to post on Pure's website. It will show you in step by step how that recovery can take place, but it's beautifully simple. I think certainly, I'm probably speaking to the converted here, but I think certainly looking at the poll earlier, having that rapid restore platform is absolutely key, especially if you've got a big, a big ransomware inflicted recovery to do. So that's crucial. And then it's future-proof. So not only do we, it's part of the core box, but again, those of you who are already Pure customers with FLASHARRAY, one of the big things that we've disrupted the storage market with is this concept of evergreen. So as long as you're paying your support contract, as we change the technology in FLASHARRAY and FLASHBLADE as part of that support agreement, we will come back and upgrade controllers and storage, etc., as part of that support agreement. And I think the key for this audience is it's a non-disruptive upgrade. Everything we do at Pure when we upgrade systems is non-disruptive. And again, just to close, SafeMode gives you those viable, clean data protection copies, and it also gives you that rapid restore platform to get you up and running as quickly as possible. So I think we will conclude there, and I think, David, we've just got the final poll here.
Excellent. Yeah, the poll on the screen now is, what's your level of confidence that you'd be able to recover from a ransomware attack today? So I'll just leave that poll up for just a moment. And while we do that poll, I want to bring back in our expert speaker, Danny, and ask you this question, which I think came in and is a really good question. Any suggestions for a good non-technology tip that I can put in place to help my company be more cyber secure?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. Great question. So we heard about an awesome combo throughout today's session, the Pure and Veeam combo. But what I want to talk about to that question is, what about a non-technology suggestion? So I would say the best non-technology suggestion I would have is practice and be ready for a breach response. Don't just have it written down. Don't just have an incident plan written down, but actually practice it. There was an organization that I know that was practicing their breach response, and they wanted to pretend like they were breached, and what are we going to do? And so they said, you know what, let's come in on a Saturday because we don't want to do this when it's convenient for us. Breaches don't happen when it's convenient. So they came in on a Saturday, and the breach team was there, and they realized all the washroom doors were locked. The building locks the washroom doors over the weekend. And they were like, whoa. They're like, if we're going to be here for a few hours in the event of a breach, we actually have to have the custodial team, the contact information for the custodial team on our breach response. And I've been doing this for 20 years. I would never think to tell someone to put a custodian on their breach response team, and they wouldn't have known unless they actually practiced it. Having the plan is one thing, but you really got to practice it. The other thing that I would suggest is talk to your employees. You know, we heard about how people are being tricked. Talk to your employees about this and ask them, try to find out what it is that they know, what it is that they don't know, and talk to them about awareness. I conducted a recent survey where I spoke to non-management staff. I had a lot of volunteers helping me with this. We got 5,000 people that were surveyed, and some of the information that I found out with regards to what it is they know, what it is they don't know, and why they think the way that they think was absolutely fascinating. If you guys want to get your hands on that, talk to your Pure Veeam actual tech media team, and I'll make sure to get that survey out to you if you guys are interested. But yes, those would be my tips. Talk to your employees, practice your breach plan.
Great insight. Thank you so much, Danny. I do want to share the results of this poll, and I find it a little scary. I mean, basically, if you add up the two bottom numbers, 74% of the companies out there aren't confident, or they're not confident that they could recover in a timely fashion. So, David, Sean, any thoughts on that?
We can help you. We can absolutely help you solve this problem. But seriously, you know, that to a large extent, that's not a shock to me. I think, as I said earlier, and I'd be interested to see what Sean thinks. You know, backup has long been optimized, for the backup side of the house, and restore has been something we occasionally do, but it's not really, it's not at the forefront of our minds. And I think that the ransomware, especially now, attackers are coming after backup images. I think the whole concept of restore, plus that sort of always on kind of mentality, I think that's driving that kind of response.
Yep, 100% agree with David. You just need to, I think we just need to have a conversation with, your technology partners and see what they can provide. Should you need to revamp what your data protection strategy is today, so that you can feel more confident that you can recover should such a scenario occur.
And Danny, did you have a final thought?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
No, we've just got the final. We've got the final slide here, and we've got just because of, I guess, sadly, the popularity of the solutions that we've been talking about today. There's an ever-growing set of collateral for you guys to read, and I talked about a recovery video that will shortly be posted on both on Veeam site and Pure site. So I'd certainly urge you to go and read some of this material, because it will talk about the solution we've talked about in more depth than we've had time to today.
Excellent. Well, I've put up a final slide here with some additional information. I want to point out that these links that you see on the slide are clickable. You can just click on those. That'll open up a new tab in your browser, or a new page in your web browser, and you can check out those resources. Also, check out the handouts tab there, and you can download the slides and other resources from today's event.